So I think the way we see it is we see beyond the labels rather than see them as barriers to connection.
Yeah.
And for us, that means we all just show up as human beings and we can have those conversations around how the labels are meaningful to us. On the exercise we actually did at one of the most recent retreats that I led was actually all about taking stickers out and writing the labels that we ascribe ourselves to. So we don't ignore them, they are there, but we see beyond them. And that's the key, is that they are things that we can see as part of ourselves. But I think when you see it as your whole identity, that becomes quite challenging because you're then limiting your world perspective to that single identity as well.
No Bullshit Talks is a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. There's too much bullshit out there, especially when it comes to business. This podcast aims to highlight what's true and what's not in the world of entrepreneurship, bringing you honest and raw conversations about the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship. Each week, my guest will be a high-performing entrepreneur sharing the ups and downs of their journey and helping you prepare for the road ahead, while providing you with actionable insights and absolute gems of knowledge. Stay tuned as I introduce this week's guest. Charlie Rogers is the founder of the Undefinable Community, which provides intimate spaces for those who intentionally live beyond conventional labels. He's spent years dedicated to helping out other entrepreneurs build a meaningful portfolio career. Outside of this, he is also a sponsored athlete who has had a top 100 place in Ironman and also represented Team GB. I present to you this week's guest, Charlie Rogers. So welcome, Charlie, to No Bullshit Talks today. I'm so pleased to have you.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
It's going to be a good conversation, I feel like, because you work with founders all the time and have so much insight into what everyone's talking about. So I'd love for you to start first by introducing who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Charlie. And when people ask me what do I do, I say a few things, which often you get a kind of puzzled response. What does that mean? And I say, beneath that, I work 4 days a week at a startup called the Portfolio Collective as a founder's associate. Even that role, I do a few things. It's finance, it's legal, it's project management, bit of everything, kind of a generalist within the role. And then outside of that, I am building a community called the Undefinable Community, about 40 members strong. We do retreats, we do gatherings, do meetups, all around living beyond conventional labels and all about sort of that bit between who we are and embracing that I'm not just one thing, I'm actually many things in life. And it's really quite beautiful seeing those people come together. And then I'm working on writing a book called Undefinable Careers, about how those individuals can navigate the careers that they're facing. And then I also do some consulting on the side. And I'm also now a semi-pro sponsored athlete too. So along the way in my own portfolio career, I've actually managed to get sponsored by a really cool company as well. So that has been another income stream for me, which has been pretty wonderful to have too.
I mean, that just like casually dropped that in the end. Just, that's so cool, which I will 100% come back to. I don't want to skip past that because that's arguably the coolest thing you've said. But I definitely want to talk about, the community and especially the fact that it's called Undefinable, which I so love for so many reasons. But it's also because right now in this day and age where we're at, everyone has a label. Everyone loves a label. It's just like they have to fit into a certain category, otherwise you don't belong. And you're like literally doing the other way around.
Yeah.
And I also love it because you're like, oh, I do lots of things. And you know what? I'm creating a community of lots of people who do lots of things. And we're embracing that lots of things because I am so sick of people just telling me I do too many things and you've got to niche down is what everyone says. Yeah. So the Undefinable sounds like a place where you're breaking all the rules, where you are kind of going against all the kind of social media trends and the norms, and you're doing something different, and you're just kind of building a place where everyone can just be themselves, and it's kind of nice, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, one of the problems we've had recently is how do we define the undefinable? How do we know who's in the community, who's not, and who does it relate to? And I think when we really sort of delved into it, we explored that there's that aspect of living beyond conventional labels. And what we mean by that is that instead of just taking on, I want to be a consultant, I want to be a founder, I want to be X, Y, Z label, it's, actually, why do I want to show up in life? What mission's important to me? And what do I want to do on a day-to-day basis? It's thinking beneath them rather than thinking, how will it look to other people? It's how does it feel to myself? And that kind of maturity is really what invites people into the community, and it leads to some of the most amazing conversations I think I've ever had.
Wow. So what made you come up with this? Where did it come from?
So I guess I've always been community building without realizing it. I've had a previous business called Househack, which was a talent accelerator and consultancy, which I did in my final year of COVID, final year of university, while we had COVID going on, and ran that for about 18 months and took that from an idea, which was just a hackathon, bringing together some students and some businesses who were challenged by the COVID environment and having them solve problems together. That then evolved into, like I say, that talent assessment center vibe, where we had this hackathon where people could also get out of it maybe a job at the end too. And it became a really cool way of building a community around problem solving, around people who are willing to spend their weekends doing extracurricular things. And so there was that kind of like ambitious sort of early careers individual. And I was like, okay, cool. There's about 37, 40 of them who turn up on a regular basis, who we then empowered to lead the sessions and scale the business. And that became a great base of people that I connected with on that journey. And then when I moved to London, sort of 22, I then basically brought them all together in different ways. I would do like Sunday scribblers. So we go out and write in different cafes on Sundays. I get people together for a little meetup where I'd co-host, and we'd bring 3 each guests, and they'd all get on together, like dinner doubles, we called it. It was really cool, particularly intergenerational. So we'd co-partner with someone who was considerably older, and then we'd have quite meaningful conversations around very different topics, which is really awesome. But beneath it all really was this theme of, I just like when people get to know one another, and I could be the catalyst for that change. And so I was writing a newsletter at the time called Mastery Your 20s, or it was then. And I just realized that there's an audience here who all really resonated around this idea of, doing many things. And so I hosted our first event back in March last year, so 2023, and got together 35 people around this idea of doing many things, had it in this little venue in East London, and just had a really awesome evening together. I put on like a little bit of thought to it, had a speaker on there, had some cards on the entrance to facilitate the conversation. But again, it was the right people in the room, and that led to some awesome conversations. And then I separated it from the newsletter and decided it was a separate thing, rebranded it into the Undefinable Community, had our first retreat in early July, and that really sort of solidified the 10 of us that went there into becoming a really sort of strong foundation for a community that we intentionally then grew slowly, and said to ourselves, rather than growing it too quickly, let's actually build it slower, get the right people in. And I said to everyone from day one, it's not going to be an income stream for me. It's going to be a way for us to reinvest into one another. So I've always thought about it as the social impact project first. And that has, I think, enabled the acceleration in terms of other people getting involved too.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I love it so much because it resonates so much with what I'm trying to do with, so I'm trying to not use the word community just because I feel like everyone's using the word community, and it is a buzzword. And I think that lots of people, when they say community, they also think in numbers. And so I have so many questions going, oh, how many people in your community? And like you were proudly saying, we've got 40. And that's a very good number, but that's also small if you look at all these silly online Slacks or WhatsApps where they've got thousands, but no one actually knows each other. Whereas your 40 are all in it together. They're all helping grow it together, and it's a lovely, lovely vibe. And so I really like that, and it's so nice. And I think that it came out really naturally as well. Like you're trying to curate this really special environment of people to have really good conversations. So I think that's really a totally different aspect of what people are trying to do, which I love. And, you talked about it's undefinable for several reasons, but also largely because, like you said, people do different things. And in your job at the moment, you're working, like, people have these portfolio careers, like, portfolio work, as you mentioned it. And, to most people, I guess like a portfolio career is people who kind of do several different things, right? And I think another term now is multi-hyphenate, is what people would like to call it. Which I would think that I would fit into that category of someone who does lots of different things. Like I said, some people see it as a negative because they think I'm doing too many things, I'm spreading myself too thin. I personally love it. I love doing different things, and I have different interests. Tell me more about that, because I feel like, again, I think the term portfolio career has kind of got itself a bit of a term from, like, I guess people who are doing like NED roles, I guess, and they're kind of bouncing about different companies. But you also said portfolio work, which I guess I want to ask you how to differentiate the two. But like, who are the sort of people that are kind of doing that, and what is the difference between portfolio work and
good question. So in my main role right now, the Portfolio Collective, we have a community of 12,000 plus portfolio professionals, people who earn via more than one source of income. That's the kind of definition there. And we see different sort of styles beneath that. Like multi-hyphenate is one of the styles that we call out, where people work very different streams that aren't related. Then there are side hustlers, people who have a main job and then work outside of that as well. And then we have the focused expert, the one that tends to earn significantly more. We ran a survey end of last year, 200 people plus answered it. And we found that those who are focused experts earned a lot more than those who weren't. And that's because they either had a specific skill. So they were either a great lawyer who could then have their own lawyer practice, obviously, but then be a speaker and then write about it and earn 3 different income streams related to their skill. Or the one that I think is the most fascinating is when they have an industry that they know better than anyone else. So you might be the guy for fintech, and you might then, again, do the public speaking around it, write a book around it, build a business around it, but you have that purpose that's higher than yourself. And that then enables you to play in what I call a category of one. So you differentiate yourself in the market because no one else can be you. We are all unique individuals, and that is part of the belief of being undefinable. And my whole theory of what I'm writing Undefinable Careers about is how do you blend those different interests together? How do you go semi-pro in a few interests and then find the golden thread of what unites them and then express that back to the world in a way that only you can compete in? So how do you find your category of one? How do you then through the different income streams relating to it? So it's quite easy for me to say, you're the guy for fintech. There's a lot of people in fintech. So you go narrower than that. You go, you're the guy in fintech who knows about how people come together around problems. Okay, that seems a bit more interesting. Maybe we can word that. Maybe we can call that the fintech catalyst, something like that. We can give it a brand. And when we give it a brand, it makes it quite exciting because then you can think about how you can spread that message beyond yourself. And it becomes really powerful for leveraging your uniqueness. And that is the kind of essence of the advice that I want to give to people. And we see this from different perspectives. There are those who are in their 50s, 60s who have that kind of Ned portfolio career. And that's definitely very true. They've often lived the experience and they've walked the walk before, so now they get to talk the talk afterwards. But then there are those, and the other kind of category is those in their 20s who are kind of forgoing the 9 to 5 as the sort of way of getting experience and instead building their careers very differently. And there are often people in between too, those who are sort of first-time mothers who are like, I can't even work full-time anymore. How do I then do 20 hours a week around it? Companies don't want to accept that. So there's a lot of rare talent involved as well in unlocking their potential, I think, through portfolio careers. Portfolio work is really quite exciting. And they all come to it from different perspectives, different lenses, different needs, different experience levels. But I do believe the principles are quite similar in how do I build leverage? How do I build credibility? How can people trust me to be the expert in my domain that I'm in? And how can I then communicate to other people? How can I do some of the business side? How can I sell things? How can I then work and collaborate with other people? If I sell a project bigger than myself, how do I bring people in? How do I automate some of the work that I do? How do I now use AI? That's a really interesting question. I'll be working with a few people on that too. And all of that kind of comes together into this whole solopreneur business slash freelancer slash like any sort of term you want to insert there of working for yourself in a leveraged way. And I think that that's the really interesting part of those that kind of make portfolio careers work for themselves. And that's totally fine. People can just earn via a few different income streams that pay by the hour. And that's totally fine if that's what they want to do. But those that I think really sort of see the exponential rewards from it are those that detach their time from their work and they either sell project fees or they then go and sell assets, like digital assets that are beyond themselves. So a lot of my thinking is how do you build the domain knowledge so you can systemize it into a project and then into a digital asset that is beyond you.
Do you know what you've just said? You just summarized basically, you're terrified of what I'm going to say. What have I just said? So I feel like you've just summarized a bunch of the stuff that all these like cowboys online try to sell, whether it's personal branding, it's like digitalizing your products, earning this passive income. It sounds like all these people who are trying to do this kind of teaching, they're selling a course and all this conveniently, like that's what they do. And it sounds like you're doing all of that, but actually legitimately, like you're actually doing it in the right way with the right intentions. Like I just heard you describe all that and I was like, you're actually talking like properly, like you're actually making logical sense. You're actually doing it from a place that makes you're actually talking about earning income, like actually building the right thing and the credibility, not just boost your personal brand and go viral. And it's like, oh my God, I'm listening to you. And I'm like, this is what should be actually being done, not the stuff that's online. So it's like, there was probably so many people I can think of right now who need what you guys are offering, but they don't even know you exist because you're not doing the whole cliche things on social media. And instead, you're actually trying to curate proper content and do this in the right way. So, like, for example, I have loads of people, myself included, right, who technically would fall under this portfolio work, as we talk about, you know. So, what should people like myself or other people be doing? And like, how do you guys help in that sense? Like, say if someone like myself came to you and was like, okay, I do all these different things. I'm kind of, because the common thing that I see with people that I'm working with at the moment is that they're doing a lot. They're doing too much. Whether it's not that it's that, like, for example, when people tell me I do too much, I don't think I'm necessarily doing too much, but I'm doing too much of the wrong things. I'm not organising my time in the right way. And like you said, some people might have like opportunities that they're missing. So it's like, say if you had a typical person that I speak to as an entrepreneur who's out there every day, trying to find the right connections, going to networking events, just desperately trying to meet the right people, trying to land speaking gigs, trying to land coaching here and there. Like, they're just trying to get all this revenue stream, but they don't know how to actually do this in a systematic way. What advice would you give to them, and where do they start, especially if they've got so many different aspects of what they do? How do they kind of organize that?
I mean, it's a great question. I think at the heart of this, you know, the Pareto's law, 80-20 here, it's how do you find what are the 20% that make the difference? And one of the books read recently talks about thinking about the vital many over the vital few over the trivial many, and how do you really double down on those areas. And I'd say, because we're talking about people who want to earn via more than one source of income, it's no longer an easy answer. The easy answer is find the one niche and make the title and do the thing. That's the obvious answer. But if you still want to sell via multiple income streams, find the consistent string and the thread that links them all together. So for me, it's undefinable. Like, that's the brand term. And then I can think about that through a community offering. So that's something that I do anyway. And then there's a coaching offering, Undefinable Coaching. Okay, cool. I can help people who are then wanting to navigate their careers as undefinables. Okay, quite clear too. Still with me. And then Undefinable Consulting. Okay, that's a bit different. How does that work? Take it a few ways here. We can say I help people who are more experienced in their undefinable careers, who have gotten quite far, and they then want to leverage their time more effectively. They want to be able to use AI or work with other people. Okay, cool. I can help them to do that. And then we can think about, in the long game, this is what I'd love to do, like sort of 5-10 years when I have more experience, is to do undefinable workplaces. Help organizations to engage that talent who want to think differently about their careers. We've sort of lived that model. My main role right now, I work 4 days a week. The other people work 3.5. We have very variable hours, and it works. We're a team of 10 full-time equivalent, and then there's like 30 others that come in for projects. But that at scale, and that with big corporates, that would be super interesting. Of like, can I help them see beyond the 9 to 5, beyond the 40 hours a week, and not just think, oh, let's do 40 hours a week down to 32, 4-day work week, we've won it. No, that's not quite how it works. So thinking about that talent engagement piece, that's my long game. But to get there is through understanding the undefinable and being able to create content and meaningful frameworks for them to navigate what they're doing. So even though I'm offering many things here, I have created a brand identity around undefinable. And that then becomes the thing that people know me for. Oh, you're the undefinable guy. Rather than you're the sales guy or you're the marketing guy. Like, it's an easier description for yourself. And that, I think, is the thing to aim for when you have these very disparate interests and these very disparate income streams, is like, what's the thing that brings together?
Well, I feel like you've just validated my whole rebrand, which is really nice, so thank you. Because I feel like I was doing so many different things and none of them really connected, and then I brought them all together under knobs, which sounds ridiculous. But obviously, I talk about no bullshit all the time. Like, that is the underlying thing. It's like the podcast, no bullshit. The agency's a no bullshit agency. Like, everything, they're like, this girl's no bullshit. So we became knobs, right? It's like, and like you said, it automatically filters out people, because it's like, some people don't want to be part of that, and now it's like, oh, she's the one that runs knobs, like, you know, it's like, queen of the knobs is like, you know, I've got all these, so it is a brand now, whereas I think before I was just like someone just ranted on about like entrepreneurship online. I didn't really have that kind of a definition, so to speak, as like, you know, and like, you know, I feel like you've just validated that, which is quite interesting. But I definitely then want to come back to what you just said about, you know, you were saying earlier, how do we define undefinable, which is almost like juxtaposition. But what about people who really attach themselves to an identity? Because you know that is the sort of thing at the moment that people are doing, like whether they are like the people who are like who have got ADHD and they're like really proudly neurodiverse, or like those who are like non-binary and trying to and bring power to like those who have that who identify as that same thing, or even like when it comes to race and like, you know, someone's like, I'm a proud black woman and that's who I am. Whatever you identify with, or whatever that is, would they feel, how would they feel being part of the undefinable? Because would they feel like you're stripping away a bit of their identity? Like, how do you deal with that sort of that?
So I think the way we see it is we see beyond the labels rather than see them as barriers to connection.
Yeah.
And for us, that means we all just show up as human beings, and we can have those conversations around how the labels are meaningful to us. Like one of the exercises we actually did at one of the most recent retreats that I led was actually all about taking stickers out and writing the labels that we ascribe ourselves to. So we don't ignore them, they are there, but we see beyond them. And that's the key, is that they are things that we can see as part of ourselves. But I think when you see it as your whole identity, that becomes quite challenging because you're then limiting your world perspective to that single identity as well. And one of the key questions we ask those who want to join our community is we ask them, when's the time that you had to give up a previous mission that you had? And that often relates to the identity piece of like, oh, I thought I was a founder, and then I realized actually I'm much better as the second person, and I just love helping people. Like, that's one story we've heard. We've heard many, and I think it's really interesting when people have let go of a previous self. I mean, myself, have closed like 2 businesses already. Like, when you let go of things, you can kind of outgrow them and become bigger than you were before, while keeping the themes of what made you successful in the first place. And I often think that is a huge sign of maturity, is able to do that, because you can see it's not just my perspective right now that matters. Like, there are other ones that also exist, and they're also correct too. Like, we can both say things that are true but have very different perspectives. Yeah. And that can lead to a much greater conversation. And I think that in the world today is what we need a lot more of. It's not just tribal, I'm this, you're that, let's just clash. It's instead, no, we're both human beings. Let's find our common ground and let's talk about things in a way that we can actually understand each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's like, because I feel like the labels now are hindering people and actually causing more harm than good in some ways. And I totally agree we need awareness. I totally agree that we need, you know, there need to be proud advocates for certain labels, 100%, and people to talk about it. And I definitely agree with that. But I do also think that if you just define yourself too narrowly, like it holds you back and restricts you. Like, even take, for example, like I said, people talk about me as a black woman, like, and I talk about some of the racial issues that I've faced and things like that. But I rarely try to position myself as that. Like, you know, I actually did create a newsletter once called The Black Female Boss, and I created this because someone told me to. And someone advised me to, and they said that this is what you need to do, this is the brand that you need to go for, and I didn't like it, and it just didn't feel me. And I think that as I started to do this, I think I started to feel more, I don't know how to describe it, but I think I was more paranoid about racial issues. I started to think, like, I think, oh, that person, are they judging me because I'm black? And like, you know, actually it wasn't even there. Like, paranoia was setting in, and like, you know, and I think like, I'm like, oh my God, they're being misogynistic. No, it was nothing to do with that. But it's because I took on this identity as the black female boss, that being that color and being that gender kind of almost hindered me and held me back and made me feel like these were negative things, but I was trying to embrace it for other black women. Whereas I think that you can just be you. And like you said, don't ignore the labels, but see past that label. So yes, I am still a black female boss, but that's not just all of who I am. And I think that's the same with a lot of other people who, you know, are identifying with either a certain condition or a certain demographic, and they're seeing that as holding them back. Like, I think even like the girl boss era, you know, and they were like, well, actually, I'm not able to get this because I'm a woman. And I'm like, that's not actually true. Like, you know, but they're always seeing themselves as slightly inferior because they're identifying with that. So I think that, you know, what you're saying now is great. And I would love to know, like, I guess, what other tips can you give for people like that who are kind of going through that phase at the moment? But it's great, you know, because I think on the other hand, finally being able to fit in somewhere, because I think that's important as well.
Yeah,
like, you know, like I said, in terms of if I was at a place and it was only like, you know, white men, like the opposite to me, then I wouldn't feel comfortable. So actually being in a room full of black women, I suddenly something safe about that, and I suddenly feel like people understand me. So I totally get there's a need for it. But then it's like, how far was too far in terms of identifying with that, and like, you know, don't want to box you in. Like I said, you don't want to become definable actually in that sense. So what advice would you give for people who are struggling at the moment with identities and that sort of stuff?
I'd say look to other aspects of who you are. So look at the values. That's something we're really strong on with the community, is we have 5 core values, and they are what we speak through. So all of our events then revolve around our values, like how can we call out one in particular, and how can we engage with that in a meaningful way. And I think the same is true for our own lives. Like we often resort to identities because we lack the words or the description or the sort of self-reflection for the other parts of who we are. So we almost say, oh, I'll fit in that box because someone else has defined that box quite nicely and I kind of resonate with that. But if you can kind of create your own boxes by blending your values, your mission, some of your life stories, some of what makes you unique, some of your unfair advantages, like put that all together. Think of the other ways of describing yourself that aren't in a title or aren't in a label, and you'll find that there's like a whole melting pot of you in there that actually, when you put it in a certain way, you can find no one else is you. And that is my hypothesis, is a way of you earning in that way that only you can, but also as a way of you living in that way that no one else can too. And it's just about being true and authentic to yourself. And to get there, I think I often see this every day now, is you need the lack of white noise in your life. So you need to be able to just sit with stillness and be quiet, and just be able to kind of go out for a walk, go out for a run, not put headphones in, not distract yourself from life, but just truly connect to yourself and truly connect to others. And you'll find that that actually will bring up who you are. And a lot of people are too afraid to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that that then resorts to, oh, I haven't had the time. Well, you make the time with that. And I honestly believe that if you just sit with yourself, you will find some of those answers.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And I think like, I don't know many people who go out without headphones. Like they always got headphones
in London, especially.
Yeah, exactly. But like actually, just we said don't have the time, but actually think about how much time a day you actually have to have those moments. Like I know that people are working from home at the moment, but like commuting, for example, people go into London at some point, and even like I live in London, I live in zone 2, so my commute is not going to be as long, but I still have at least half an hour on the train every day. So that's half an hour, then half an hour back. That's an hour.
Yeah, that's one time.
And then like I walk my dog, so there's another couple of hours and stuff like that. So like imagine that's 3 hours a day that I've got alone with my thoughts.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously going to be other moments, like say if you're having a coffee and like you sit down, you have a coffee, you just have a moment. Like most people switch on the TV or they watch a YouTube video or they do something. They fill up those gaps. But actually, if they actually took those moments, and you don't have to be meditating or doing that sort of stuff. And I think there's too much pressure on that wellness and mindfulness that becomes a bit of a barrier to people, because they're like, oh, I'm not woo like that, or I'm not like, you know what I mean? People find it even more like, but actually just sitting there completely in silence with your thoughts with a cup of coffee for even 5 minutes, I think it's really interesting. So I a lot of the time I have my big AirPod Maxes that I have. I put them on noise cancelling and I don't have anything go through them.
Nice.
Most of the time that's what I'm doing. And I just, it's really changed how I feel and how I feel inside and how I understand my own thoughts and what I'm going through, because I think before I'd always have a podcast on or something and I'm consistently just downloading information in my brain. That's an overload and my brain doesn't actually get to rest. So when you're on a train or like I said, 3 hours of the day, I'm doing that essentially. Sometimes I fill it up with podcasts, but you know, like,
oh my God.
I dare I. But you know, that's a lot of time in a day that I've got to actually just be alone with my thoughts. And actually it's really shocking sometimes what goes through your head. And it's just like, but then you start to realize actually, wow, I didn't realize I actually cared enough about that thing. Like it's playing through my mind quite a lot. And actually then you start to realize where your attentions lie or the ideas that keep bumbling up in your head. And again, these ideas, you can't be creative, I don't think, unless you give yourself that time to be creative. And people are like, I don't have time to do all this sort of stuff. But like you said, you've got to create time. And I think it's really different.
Yeah, I think it really is. And you do get a lot out of that stillness. And I totally relate on the kind of wearing headphones purely for the noise cancelling. Whenever I walk through London sometimes, I'm like, it's overwhelming.
It's too much.
So overwhelming. I'm like, wow, okay. And then you go into like countryside for a day. Oh, well, why won't I live here again?
I know. I do it every time, and I'm just like, the thing is, I love London as well. I love the fact that you've got the world at your fingertips. Anything you want, any type of food you want, any cuisine, like just mad experience in London. But then it's like, I think I need both. That's why I have to leave London frequently enough that it doesn't become overwhelming. I think that noise cancelling headphones are essential for London too.
For sure. Yeah, and I think the other way I do it as well is through my running and through my sport.
Yeah.
And people always look at me weirdly when I say I don't wear earphones when I train. They're like, what? Like, don't we all? And I'm like, no, I don't take my phone out. It's just me and the watch. Yeah. I mean, I have a watch that would track my sports, so it's okay. Yeah. But going out for even just this morning was like an hour and 10, just easy running, with your thoughts. Kind of, if you ask me what I thought about on the run, I have no idea. But it was sort of time alone, and it's nice. And some of the times I also go out for like 3-4 hour bike rides, and that's, again, no earphones in, just present with it. And I did one on Sunday, a 33k run, and sort of halfway through, I was like, kind of, we're getting there, like a little bit further to go, like another sort of 60 and a half to go. But I actually found that you kind of got that peace as well. And it was just like, just one foot in front of the other, keep going towards the ends. And then that for me was like, okay, I feel a lot more refreshed. I mean, I have a lot on in life right now across the different aspects of my portfolio work, portfolio career. But even within that, I think that the sport becomes a grounding mechanism for me. And it's my way of coming back to me, even though everything else wants my attention outside of it.
You're just like casually like, oh yeah, I'm a sponsored athlete, Team GB. It's not often you get to speak to Team GB. So tell me about this, because like I said, you're doing all that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're literally the definition of a portfolio now. But this is also random means. I feel like other people who are doing portfolio, it's like, it's all kind of business, but just different areas, like you said, authoring, speaking, and like work. Yeah. That's a normal consulting sort of way. Team GB. Yeah. Like you said, are you still pro technically now? So you're not semi-pro.
So we'll take semi-pro.
Okay.
We won't verge on that.
Okay. Well, I feel like the definition of pro is to be paid for. It's a technically, well, okay.
Maybe full time.
Okay. Talk me through this, because tell me through how this happened. What's your history? How you got to where you are now? Because it's also fascinating.
Yeah, it's a good story. So I started when I was about 14 doing running. Joined as one of the worst ones there in my running club. And turned out it's actually the oldest running club in the world. Didn't know that at the time.
Which one?
But part of my school, so Shrewsbury School, had a Royal Shrewsbury School hunt, and that actually got commemorated as the oldest running club in the world.
Oh,
because
really?
they used to have, they used to go out with, like, this might sound about where the school I went to, but they had to go on horses to go and chase like hounds and like, and then they didn't have horses one day, so instead decided to run after the game they were chasing instead. Which was the start of the cross-country club.
Oh, very cool. I thought I was definitely part of one of the oldest running clubs. I was part of Birchfield Harriers.
Ah, yes. They're also
they're also but that's very cool. I love that. I don't think they went quite as far as chasing the hounds, so that's all fine. But you were 14, which already is a late start. Which I mean, like, how is that? How did you start so late? What made you decide at 14 suddenly one day I'm just going to start running?
Good question. So I think for me, I was into like different forms of sports. So when I went to my secondary school, I sort of tried rowing in that sort of 13 bracket, and then also did a bit of football, bit of all sports, but was never like amazing at one. And so I knew that I was kind of a good enough runner. I'd done some when I was younger. I wouldn't say I really tried or thought of it that it was a sport, more just PE. But then at 14, I had an amazing running coach. I think this is often how these stories start. And he said to me, you should, come along, get involved in our club. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Just turned up and then just kept turning up. And it's the kind of sport where the more you do it, the more rewards you get. And he sort of taught me and gave me a lot of direction towards getting involved in the races. Did my first race when I was like 14, 15. And then throughout that time of school till I was 18, just kept getting better and better. And it kept like improving and getting faster than people I was around. And I was like, this is getting quite exciting. Like the exponential rewards to competency were coming together. And so by the time I left when I was 18, I was the vice captain of the club, which is pretty awesome. And then I chose Loughborough as my university, which
but that's not one of the toughest sports schools, I feel like. So I remember them beating us up every time at netball. So I remember they were really good.
Good time. And yeah, at Loughborough, I actually went more for the experience. I took it as my only choice and said to myself that I want to learn everything about starting a business. So I did international business. And I said to myself that actually the degree is the least important part. Sorry if you're academic, but that's what I thought. And I was like, I'll get a good grade anyway. Got a first in the end, so did okay. But for me, it was the bits around the edges, the sports, the clubs, the experience that I could have that were going to teach me about the world and teach me about how to do something meaningful. And one aspect of that was the sport. And so being there, again, I went from, now I'm pretty good at my home club. And then, one of the worst ones again, because you're back in this huge pool of talent. You're back with these people who are thinking 100-mile weeks are normal. And you're like, okay, time to upgrade, time to go bigger. And so had to really integrate myself into that group of people who are thinking differently about their running. I saw quite a lot of them get injured, quite a lot of them overtrain. That's quite common because you're in this highly competitive environment and people want to push themselves all the time. Like you go out for an easy run or like a tempo run, which is sufficiently vague that anyone can decide how far or how fast they want to go. And by the end of it, they've already injured themselves ahead of the race on the weekend. So really key is not getting too caught up, but using it as inspiration and using the people around you as kind of, keep telling me how you think differently about it. And so while I was at uni, I think my 5K time might be most telling about this. I think I went in with about an 18:55, and by the time I left, I did 14:49. So
I don't know what the world records are or anything like that, but shaving off that much of a percentage sounds mega.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good.
And just for context, what is like a GB record around that time?
Like on the track, so that stuff was on road, but on track around 12 minutes, as you're looking at.
So you're not far off.
Not far off, but that last bit is hard. That last bit is hard.
Wow.
But yeah, being around those people and having an amazing coach as well really helped me to focus on that during uni, and then sort of left uni, and I actually managed to, in my second year, my first year at university, collapse during a running race. So I was running about like a 12K race, about 500 meters from the end, just collapsed. And I was like, whoa, what's going on?
500 meters from the end?
Yeah. And I was literally dying on the ground, put me back of an ambulance. My heart rate's at like 180, still the entire evening. And so make my way to hospital in the ER room. And then they basically do all these scans and over like 2-week period come back clear. And they say nothing that we can tell is wrong with you, but you might not be able to do sport to a high level. And I was like, okay, I think I want to do sport to a high level. Yeah. So I continued then afterwards to cut things from my diet. And one of the things that I cut was caffeine. And I found that really helped, probably unsurprisingly in retrospect. But I found that cutting caffeine enabled me to compete at a high level without I get pain in my neck, was where I'd have it. And so then I was doing it well. And I'd always have this sort of like, am I overtraining? Am I not? And I went to see a cardiologist in 2021 after uni, and they said to me, it's purely in your head, like whatever's left, in the sense that, again, scans clear, but it's pretty much psychological. So you're putting too much pressure on yourself. So that, again, became an interesting narrative of like too much pressure on myself. Okay, how can I not do that, but still be in a sort of competitive mindset? And so I remember did a little bit of like traveling in different locations after COVID, got to break free. So I did about 4 weeks at a time around different places in the UK. And as I was doing that, I sort of reflected on my goals, what I wanted to do. On the 10-year goal list was to do an Ironman. And I was like, why not just do it in 1 year? Why am I waiting 10 years? So I just signed up for the Ironman the year afterwards. So I was meant to do it in June 2022. But you can tell by the way I'm saying meant to, that didn't quite go to plan. So I moved to London and then trained hard. So my running was quite good. So running one part of the triathlon, swim, bike, run. And swimming I used to do when I was younger. So was relatively good. I can't say I'm amazing at it, but relatively good. And then cycling is quite transferable fitness from running. So that's also, again, a benefit from me, especially on hills. And I'd signed up for, unknowingly, one of the hilliest Ironmans in the world, like 3,000 plus meters elevation on the bike, and then like a 400 meter plus on the run as well. So everyone kept telling me, why'd you sign up for that one as your first one? I was like, it's the UK one. Why wouldn't I do that? And they were like, oh, well, it's the huge one with loads of elevation. And so as I kind of got closer, I did like 9 months training, got to about May time, was feeling fit. I've been training on this like 300-pound bike. Bear in mind, in this sport triathlon, people have like 10,000-pound bikes. Like top end is really expensive. And so this really heavy bike, just one I got at uni, was good enough. Went out to Mallorca with my triathlon club in May. Bear in mind, I've got about a month or two till race day. I'm feeling fit, feeling healthy. And we go out. First few days are great. You know, they've given me this carbon frame. I'm like, oh, this is so light. I go up the fly up the hills, come down at speed, feeling good. And then we go out for this big day, and it's about 140k day on the bike. And you know, feeling good. It's gonna be great. Loads of scenery. We're in Mallorca. It's gonna be beautiful. And we go up some of the mountain climbs, you know, get some of the fastest times on the climbs from our club, and I was feeling good about myself. I was maybe a bit overconfident. And then so make our way through the mountainside, come out the other end, and then there's these sort of series of switchbacks that are very sharp. So there's one that does about 270 degrees turn, about that. It goes over a bridge. And I'd taken that at 63 kilometers an hour. So I'm coming flying down towards this bridge, and I try to hit the brakes. The brakes on the European bikes are the way around. So your front or your back, and your back's your front, which is kind of significant in that switch second there. So I'm hitting them, and my bike's shaking. And sort of slow down, and I kind of have a choice: either lean into the ground and scrape my entire body, or I go and hit the crash barrier and go over. Not there's much of a choice at that point, but the latter happens, and I hit the crash barrier. Bike stays on the road. I go over, and there's like a 10-foot drop, river below, and sort of hit the rocks. So I basically only break my little finger, which is incredible to be honest, and very heavily bruise my back, but pretty much pull myself up from the side as this adrenaline's kicking in. I get to the side of the road, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, everything now hurts. And then I lie down, and I can just see all these sort of club mates coming around and throwing onto me these jumpers and jackets, and me looking up in the sky and seeing these birds fly around. I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm still remaining positive. I'm like, wow, you know, that was quite an experience, wasn't it? It's what I remember saying to myself. And they call the ambulance. We get it out to this like top of the mountain. It's middle of nowhere. And they put me on the morphine and take me into a hospital. And the guy says to me in the hospital, he says, if you can prove you can walk, then you can go home tonight. I was like, it's going to hurt, but I'm drugged up. Let's do it. So I prove I can walk. And then they take me home that evening to where I was staying with the club. And, you know, just a great celebration because everyone's like very curious about what's happened. And I then have to make a choice about, do I come back and try and do the Ironman that year? Bear in mind, I've got my whole arm in a cast. I'm like, maybe not. Or do I defer by a year and take it more seriously and do it the year afterwards? And so as I'm contemplating that after coming back to the UK, I sort of realized that I'm actually, to come back the year afterwards is the harder choice. I could cross a line and do it this year or in 2022, but actually I wouldn't do myself justice. And so I decided instead to commit for another year and defer it, and instead do a half Ironman like at the end of summer. So in September, be fit enough to do that. That race, end of summer goes well. I qualify for world champs, Ironman 70.3 world champs the following year, my first ever Ironman race. And then I'm like, okay, I'm all in now. So I get a pro coach, take it seriously, and train like 15, 20 hours a week. Do that for basically 12 months up until the following season. In that season, I also put in an extra race where I managed to qualify for European Championships in 2024, which is the one where I wear my GB vest. But in that season, I go and compete and come to Ironman UK, where I come 33rd overall out of about 1,000. About 45% didn't finish because of how hard it is. So even finishing it is incredible. But to be up there and me on my road bike, these people on their like 10,000 pound like TT bikes. I'm just taking a road bike that I've got. I mean, it's a nice road bike, let's be real here, but just putting the clip-on tri-bars on there. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely some aero gains to be missed off from that. But I was there enjoying it, got over the line, my body could feel the salts in my legs come over. And there's an amazing video my mum took of me coming around the corner. You ring your bell when it's the first time, and there's this kid looking at me like ring the bell, and I just go and like absolutely smash it, and then just running towards the line, my arms out, and I can just remember my legs starting to cramp. And I was like, just get me over the line, don't break down before the line. And we get there, and that's the Ironman is what 3.8k swim, 180k bike, and then a marathon at the end. So pretty incredible day out, which was pretty awesome. And then did the 70.3 World Championships out in Finland end of August as well, where I got a 28-minute PB and came top 100 in the world for my age group, which is pretty awesome. And that was like 4,000 people on a race, which was, I've never seen that many people racing at one time. It was incredible. And then basically the following year, the year that's just been, basically decided, okay, I want to do running this year. So I did the London Marathon in April, and that became my focus for sort of the winter months. And at that race, did a 2 hour 40, which was quite good. I was aiming for sub 2 hours 30, I won't lie. And we've got unfinished business, so we'll see if we can do it again this year. But on that process, also always had in mind that I had the summer opportunity to wear the GB vest. And so from like end of June, took it seriously again, started training, and then basically competed in Vichy in France. And it was quite a mad race, to be fair. We had a river swim. River swim is always interesting because you get the current coming at you and then behind you. And then on the bike, it was the wettest day I've ever seen in my life. And I come out like, okay, I'm feeling good. The bike's my like strong point. I kind of get better. My swim's okay. My bike's pretty good. My running's really good. So I get better throughout the race. Some people go the other way around. They start out really fast and they get slower. And so I pull out on my bike and then get about 3K out the first roundabout, really slippy. Bike slips from underneath me and basically just a total wipeout. And so I have to like pick myself up from the side of the road, and the bike handlebars, the left one's like pretty leaned in from it, and the chains come off. So I'm there like lifting it up, doing like mechanical work on the side of the road, and sort of after about a few minutes, put myself back on, and I got this pain down my left side, but I was like, adrenaline's in, we're fine. And so I kind of take my corners in that bike ride, like pretty easy, like let's not take it too bad. And then come back in and sort of get onto the run. I run strong, so finish that out in a good time and come 15th in European champs. So yeah, that was quite a day out and made the most out of difficult situations. But I always felt that in those moments, you sort of got to realize what's possible and try your best, because the pressure on myself was just to enjoy that race. And I think I did, hopefully, retrospectively, as much as I probably didn't enjoy at the time. But I think I also got out of it what I needed, which was, sort of cap out 3 years of triathlon while I now go and think about how can I be an endurance athlete? So even when I'm thinking about undefinable parts, I'm thinking at first I was a runner, then I was a triathlete, and now I'm an endurance athlete. So you almost think bigger. It's like, what category can I play in that's bigger than before? And so now I'm eyeing up maybe a 100K ultra race next year.
I've got so many questions to ask now. That was one hell of a story. I was like so gripped. I was like, feel like I was watching a movie or something and listening to hear saying that, and I was like, oh my God, are you going to survive? And I'm like, no, you're here, you're alive. So nothing bad happens to you. You didn't become paraplegic or anything. So I'm just like, but that could have been way worse than it is. And I guess that's the peril of sport.
Yes.
And also it's the peril of like, you went to Loughborough, like that is the sporting uni in the UK. And it's like, but how many people go and then injure themselves and that's it, career over. So it's scary. But I want to go back, I guess chronological order makes the most sense.
Yep.
You started at 14.
Yeah.
Like, in the grand scheme of things, that's late. People say that's early, like you're only a kid or whatever, but no, that's really late.
Yeah.
And to get to where you are now, and you only started then, is quite some achievement already. Because like you said, you started, you were the worst in your club, right? Yeah, so it's like already that's, as a teenage boy, I feel like you already have a lot of things you're dealing with as it is. And it's like coming in and be like, oh, actually, I suck compared to everyone else. Like, it can't be great. And then going back to uni and be like, okay, I suck again. Like, it's hard. And I think that what you said is so real, because so many people think they're amazing at something. Like, they all do. And then until they get to a room of other people, they don't understand who's in the room. Yeah. And it's like, there's always someone better than you out there. That's the thing. You just need to find them. And like, you just don't realise who's in the room. And I think that is quite eye-opening when you do surround yourself by incredible people. And I think that people react differently, right? So some people just go, oh God, I can't do this. There's no point. It's not any point trying, right? If you're the worst at what you do, what's the point of even trying? You went from the worst to the best at what you do. Yeah. Like, can you please talk me through how that works? Because it's a lot. Like you said, the amount of training that goes into it, like the actual decisions that did it, like I said, I didn't go to a sports uni, but I know Loughborough Uni well, and it's intense. Yeah. Like, I did a lot of sport growing up as well. Like, so I ran for Birchfield. I played netball to a decent level, and I played tennis to a decent level. I say decent, nowhere near decent as your level. I'm saying is that, but enough that I played against those sort of universities and got hammered every time. That's what I'm saying. But I know like how good they were, and like that's what I'm saying. So I know like the fraction of work that people had to do to get there, but then to get further than that, like, is just off the scale level of work. And it takes a lot. Like you said, you also wanted to learn how to do business. Like, talk me through what it takes from a mentality perspective as well, because obviously you're doing something physical, so we're going to talk about that separately. But first, to even get to the point where you even want to physically train, I think you need a hell of a lot of mental strength. And so talk me through what it's like being a 14-year-old boy who's arguably the worst runner in his club, to like what it takes to build up to become vice captain at the end of this school year, and then go to the strongest like sporting university in the country and being arguably one of the worst there again, and again being the best. Like, that's a roller coaster of thing. How did you get through that?
So I'd say at the beginning, it's about having fun, like reframing it. So if I take myself back to the 14-year-old self, it's turning up and just enjoying it and saying, oh, I'm just here to have a good time. I'm just here to spend time with some friends, go out on some runs, and actually enjoy the skill that I'm doing. And that then starts the process. You start doing it for the love of it. And you're like, oh, okay, actually, along that way, well, I can maybe get good at this. And then that's something clicks. You go, oh, I can actually improve if I do more of it. And I think a big part for me, like I mentioned before, was the having a coach, a running coach, believe in me and sort of transfer that belief of like, oh, he thinks I can race. Oh, wow, maybe I can race. So then do that first race, like relatively in the grand scheme of things, like went probably okay. I can't even remember where I would have finished in that. But that then gives you the confidence of, oh, I can race. I'm now a racer. You sort of then identify with the thing you're doing. And you start to keep turning up and you start doing, okay, maybe if I'm doing 2-3 runs a week, I'll do 4 or 5. Okay, what does 4 or 5 get me? Okay, 4 or 5 gets me a few more results. Okay, I can then see myself getting faster than other people. There's that competitive mindset too of like, oh, it's a very relative sport. So yes, it's individual. And yes, you have your own speed. I have my own speed. We'll all improve differently. But also I can measure my time against yours. Let's be real. And so there's that mindset too of, oh, I can get there faster. And we had a sort of first 8, second 8 is what we called it, which were the sort of like top teams in that club. And that became the kind of goal, is to make in the second 8 to begin with. Like, how can I get in that second 8? Because we'll go and do the races, the most important races. And then it was how can I get in the first 8, and then, you know, becoming vice captain afterwards. And that like motivating factor of like, I want to get to that next level was always there in my mindset. But even along the way, I remember having some of like the worst races. I think when I was vice captain in my final year, at one of the most important races where I made the team, I was one of the 2 that didn't actually qualify in terms of where we positioned at the end for the team points, yet we won overall. We won overall by 1 point, and it was my coach's last year, and it was like his most incredible story, and it was amazing. But I was one of the 2 that didn't actually count in that. And so when the whole school was celebrating, they got us all up on stage, and they had us go and like be thankful for that moment and appreciate it. I was there like, I feel like a fake, I feel like a fraud in that. And I think for me, that became another motivating factor again, because I'm like, no, okay, I need to prove to myself that I can do this and I am more than that race. And it was such a weird scenario of like, I'm happy for him, happy for what we've all done, but individually, I'm like, could have done so much better. And so when I went to uni there afterwards, it was very much, okay, in the deep end again. And like I said, that first year, having that sort of heart experience, the heart problem as well, that became an interesting factor of like, oh, you can't do it. Yeah, I can do it. And so that mindset of it can be taken away from you at any time, and that you're always living near not being able to do something, is what I think then motivated me throughout university. Was that I don't get this, no one gets this life. Yeah, we do. It's a blessing that we have it. So being able to actually go in and make the most of it and live like it's your last day, because genuinely sometimes it might actually be, then helps me to actually try and work out what the goals I'm aspiring towards. I mean, wasn't really drinking much in first year. I wouldn't do much of the sort of normal things that people do at university, dare we say. I was kind of in on sport, in on entrepreneurship, in on things that matter to me, because I had that experience with, you know, the near-death experience, but also the kind of wanting to be more. And I think what then took me from, you know, being good at a club level into being good at like a regional, then like national level, was I stayed the game. I stayed the course. Other people, I know a lot of those who were around my level at the end of school who just went to uni and dropped off. Just thought, I've got other things that are more important. Fair enough, maybe they do. But now I see them coming back to the sport, and I'm like, the missed 5 years, 6 years there is where you could have been great. And so for me, doing that consistently throughout that time, while also still having fun, like I'm not going to not do nothing, but still also doing the other interests that I have, that being a consistent source means that I've been doing it longer, and that's led to a lot of the results as well. So I'd say throughout university, that switch was being able to show up consistently and to follow my own coach's program. So rather than training with Loughborough, I actually have my own coach and I train a lot by myself. I do races with them, I do some sessions, but I was very much like, what's my plan versus what's the team's plan? That was also valuable. And then throughout COVID, my final year at uni, so 2020, that was, when I did my 14:49 time, did that by myself in lockdown. Like my training was going so well, I was looking forward to be able to like put it on the stage and be out there, and then took it away from you again. So I was like, I can't race. I couldn't race like a year because all the races would get filled up so quickly because they had limited spots because of COVID. And so then you had to sort of roll the fitness, and then that kind of experience with the Ironman and being able to, train for that and then get thrown off a cliff on my own doing. That then again reminds you, it's like, don't take it for granted, yeah? Like you only get this one life. And for me, that's setting these big, scary things that like terrify me. Like, can I do an Ironman? I don't think I can. Maybe it's possible. Okay, yeah, I can. And so now when I'm thinking about that, I'm like, what scares me? But the thing is, the bar keeps getting higher. And so right now when I say 100K ultra race, I'm like, can I do that? I don't know. Okay, it's worth doing then. So anything that scares me is worth doing. And the more I run towards that, the more that I'll find that I get to these levels of ambition, these levels of progress that I think others wouldn't stay the course for.
But how do you get to that level of like embracing your fear? Because I feel like all the things you just said, like I said, you had near-death experience, and most people would be like, well, I'm just going to stay away from this then. Like, if you're, and look at the narrative now on social media, it's like health comes first. Like everyone is like very much, whereas I feel like back in the day, people would just like do all sorts of crazy things and didn't really care about health. Now everyone's like, health comes first. Like, everyone's really big on that. But, people might say to you, and probably have said to you, Charlie, it's just running.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, it's just a sport. It's just running. Like, why are you risking your health and your life to do this thing? And like you said, you're like how passionate or whatever, you're undefinable, but you're doing so many different things. Why does this matter to you so much that you are risking your health and everything for? And like you said, you're going from, something that was a smaller thing and now you're like 100K races. That's huge. Like, what is it that's making you drive to do these things despite all those odds against you?
For one, it's curiosity. I think that's genuinely like what's possible. If I can start with not being very good and then do that, like I think that I can do the next thing. And it's that curiosity of like, could I do it? Maybe I could. That'd be cool. But I think there's also that there's obviously the ambition with yourself of like, I want to be better than I was before. And how to get better is by doing bigger things. And then there's what else would I do? Like I've sort of become part of that mindset and it's part of my DNA now, where it's hard not to live like that. And so I think there's definitely the truth in me taking things on a like intentionally amateur level would be a bit like, okay, that'd be hard. Maybe I'm just wired that way now. I don't know. But seeing the opportunity and wanting to do things properly versus wanting to just show up and get it done, I feel like I'm not doing myself justice. And I'd rather do all the inputs I can. If the output doesn't come out perfectly, great, that's fine. That was a race condition or that was something else that impacted you, that's fine. But if I do all the inputs, do all the training days, but I had like a Strava streak for like, I don't know, a year and a half. And again, it's knowing with this, when it's too much too, when you injure yourself by doing too hard, too much. I think it's the same thing with life. And my frame back to these people would be, what's healthier? Is healthier not realizing your potential and sort of staying safe? Or is healthier going after it, but maybe along the way breaking a few bones and having a few long-term injuries? Like, I think it's the latter. I think I'd rather die as someone who's used their body than someone who hasn't. But that's a personal.
It is a personal thing. I'm sure a lot of people won't agree with that, but it is quite remarkable. And, just thinking all the things that you just said and like, yeah, I guess it's like who you are now as a person. Yeah. You can't take that away from you. And I guess it's like, your body as well. And like your body's supposed to be pushed. And I think that's same with a lot of people now talking about stress and they sort of stop working because they feel like, stress is I'm going to get stressed. I don't want to get overwhelmed. But stress is a good thing. Stress is like to a certain extent, obviously, like same as the pressure on your body. It's a good thing. It's like, do you like it pushes you to go further, and you know what your kind of limits are. And when you were talking about earlier, you are during your injuries, and they said that it's all in your head and everything like that. It made me think, because I injured myself. I had multiple knee surgeries, and I loved sport. Like I said, I played all that sport. It was a big part of my life, and I felt like I had this weird like identity dissociation for several years because I couldn't play, and I ended up. I was on crutches like non-stop, on and off, like for 10 years. And then I had this surgery finally because I finally knew what was wrong. I had all the reconstructive surgery. Went wrong and I couldn't walk for 2 years.
Wow.
And it was like, it was even worse. It's like, I was like, what is going on? And now I'm at this weird, I finally had another one, and I've been kind of correcting it and everything okay. But again, it's that same sort of thing. And I'm listening to you like pushing yourself. I'm like, oh, I don't want to push myself, because I start to feel pain. I'm like, is that a bad thing? Is that because I've overworked myself, like you said? And it's, and it is a lot. It does mess with your head a lot. I think it really is. And like when you ask orthopods or physios, and they was like, oh, you got to listen to your body. And I'm like, I don't bloody know. And it's really hard. It's like, am I pushing myself? And I want to push myself because actually, and also that's a part of the endorphins, right? You know, you push yourself, and like you said, you're doing this thing. You're like, can I do this? It feels amazing, right? And it's like, but then at the same time, you don't want to overdo it. Like I said, some of the people burnt out. So it is a really fine line, and it's just like listening to you is quite incredible. So and I now want to delve into like really specifics, because I feel like you got from that to like now where you are, which is nuts, and you're still going. Like you haven't even finished, you're still going. And I just feel like I want to break it down a little bit. I want to go from, like you said, you had a Strava streak for like 1.5 years, but what does a training schedule like that look like? Because you set yourself a goal, and it's the same as in business. Like you said, like people set themselves a goal. And I think people set all these random goals, and they don't even know like how to set them. They just picked a goal out of thin air because someone else has done it or something, like, you know? And then it's like, how do you even get to that goal? And goal setting, I think, is a bit murky in business. I think people do the wrong things. But I'd love to understand your training schedule, because you can't just rock up and do an Ironman without serious thought and planning. How did you pick up a training schedule, including like diet, like everything, and stick to it? Because like, you know, the weather sucks in England. It's not like you can go out on a nice sunny day every day and go for a run. So talk me through that.
Very true. So I think there's probably 2 layers to this. There's a layer of like, how do I plan for things? Which I take to sport, but I think I take to everything, which is I do end of the year, kind of whole year in review, like what's gone well, what hasn't, what can be improved, what are the major themes, who have I met that's changed the course of the year, like how can I think about some of the finances, where I'm at with my entire life. So I do that on a yearly basis. That's probably quite common advice that anyone would see. But then on a quarterly basis, or I say quarterly, but it's basically around key projects. So it might be thirdly, might be monthly. It depends when I have the milestones. And the milestones are often sport related, because they're quite easy to say that's the end point, while other things are harder to give milestones to. So I might have, I'm currently just finished my last phase, which was up to end of September. And that was sort of doing the Team GB, wearing the age group, like going out there to Vichy. And that was the kind of milestone at the end of it. And I basically then planned what were my intentions. So I say, oh, I intend to compete as well as I can at the race in Vichy. Okay, great. What are the goals beneath it? How do my goals attribute to the intention? Okay, so I will have a 12-week training program that's relating on the triathlon specific for that time, but I'll also do 8 weeks afterwards on the marathon training, which I'm currently in now. I'll blend them together and I'll do it my own way. I'll go into details on specifically that in a moment, but I can then attach these sub goals to the intention. And then when it gets to the race day or the milestone or whatever it is, if it's moving the community further along, or if it's sort of move my own main role or career, or whatever the intention is, then when I get to the next review, the next quarter, I can sit back and be like, oh, okay, I've moved the needle. I maybe have like achieved that goal, easy tick. Or the fun one, I haven't achieved that goal, but I've actually got closer to the intention. That's still pretty good progress. Mm-hmm. So I think we often hold ourselves in a yes-no category with our goals. We go, yes, we've achieved it, or no, we haven't. When actually, if through having the goal, we've moved closer to the intention, it still worked. And so that is my way of not being too hard on myself when my goal might be like an outcome one. It's often inputs, but if it's an outcome one of like achieve a certain time in a race, which is a pretty clear one that I do, then if I get there and I haven't achieved the time, but all the training's gone well beforehand and I've done it to the letter and I've turned up, showed up on those bad days and I've really done my best, I can't do much more. And so it's reviewing the situation, understanding what the factors were, maybe nutrition, maybe it was not stretching, or stretching is a different issue, but not doing certain things, then I can review that and improve. But I can't seriously say to myself, I haven't given my best, because I've controlled the inputs to the nearest factor I can. So I do that on a quarterly basis. And then on a weekly basis, I also review each week too. And I have this journal. I just finished my 4 years of doing it every week.
I think I saw that on LinkedIn. I was really impressed. Yeah, that was really cool.
So that was 4 years of doing it since 2020. And then I just started my new one as well. And so they become a way of me monitoring the week by week basis of what the slight tweaks. Am I on track towards the long-term goals? Am I making a difference? And then the quarterly becomes what the major projects. And then the yearly becomes what are my big themes? What do I want to go after this year?
I think that's what I was hearing there is something that I really, really believe in. And it's that being really process oriented and not results oriented. Because I think, like you said, I think one of the biggest reasons why people fail at goals is because they are setting these big, was it the BHAG? What was that guy who, I can't remember who created that BHAG thing, that big, hairy, audacious goal thing that everyone did. And it was just yes, it's aspirational. Yes, it's something that motivates you to achieve this really cool thing. But then if you're they don't achieve it, then you see yourself as a failure. You're oh my God, I suck. I'm not good. I'm a failure. I'm not going to do it again. But actually, like you said, if you're making progress towards that goal and you're still better than you were before, that should be something to be celebrated.
Oh, for sure.
And like I said, I think if you're doing everything right, and also conversely, you could achieve that goal and you could have done everything wrong. You could have set yourself some really bad habits and you just got lucky along the way. And suddenly you think, okay, this is great. And I think this is how unscrupulous business practices happen as well, because they cheat just to get to their goals because they want to achieve these targets. But they've done it in dodgy ways.
I'll get you loads of engagement, but I'll use pods to get you there.
Exactly that. And it's or they'll just lie, cheat and steal to hit sales targets or whatever and get customers that are never ever going to stay with them. So it's I think these goal settings are really, really bad. If you're just purely results oriented. Whereas that's why I think that a lot of these things on commission and stuff like that, and same as you're building a community right now. Imagine having a referral scheme. You just added £100 incentive or something. You're going to get loads of people referring people because they just want that £100. And it's for exactly the wrong reason. So for me, it's all about the process. And so I love that. That's what you're saying. You're focusing on those bits. How would this then relate to say what you are building with Undefinable, for example? Because I feel they seem like they completely don't correlate, but like you said, it's all about having that common thread, and they still do, because like you said, all those things we've talked about today, they relate to entrepreneurship, all the mindset things, all the the things that you have to do to overcome adversity and finding yourself, in the worst possible position, but actually being able to achieve things. And there's a lot of parallelism here. So how are you relating, even the goal setting thing I think is fascinating. How are you relating your career to go from 14-year-old boy who was the bottom of his class to being Team GB now, I said, sponsored athlete? How are you relating to that to Undefinable?
So I think for me, I was actually going to write a book in 2020, or I wrote 30,000 words of it, called How to Start. And my theory with that was, for me to create something meaningful in the world, I first must master myself. And I think that that's still very true with anything that I create in terms of entrepreneurship wise. I can show up as a more effective version of myself when I am doing the bits for myself outside of it. And so when I've done this morning a 70-minute run and I feel good, I can be better present with this. And I think that that's very true about all the different parts of my professional life too, is that I can show up as a more true, valuable, authentic person when I have my own personal life sorted and I feel in control of it and I feel like I'm making progress in that too. And so the two things are not separate. They are interdependent, they overlap. And for me, by living as an undefinable, by having these super interests, I almost stand for that as a person. And the amount of conversations, I actually had one last week where we were speaking about, he was also Team GB as well. I had a conversation come from a LinkedIn post, and that then led to us speaking about, can we partner on something related to undefinables too? Can we partner because we both have many interests as well? And you often find that people who are wanting to do sport to a semi-pro level are often really interested in other aspects as well. How can I get really good at something else? And so that mindset of getting good at something can be applicable to other aspects of life too.
I just want to ask, who should be an undefinable?
Who should be undefinable? Yeah. I feel like quite a lot of us can relate to it, and quite a lot of us are in some ways undefinable, in some ways perhaps more definable, and that's okay too. I think who should, I always hate the word should because no one.
Terrible word, to be honest, actually,
but I guess in this who is an undefinable and who perhaps wants to be an undefinable. Anyone that lives by the 5 values. So let me hopefully get these right. Collective responsibility. It's a CARES model. That's how I remember it in my head. Collective responsibility, purposeful action, respectful curiosity, seriously silly, and emotional bravery. They are the key values that we have, and they are what unites the undefinables. So you might do a completely different thing from me, but we are all emotionally brave, so we're going to have meaningful conversations. We're all taking purposeful action. So I think we even just had an accountability club set up recently. So there's even that tangibly being done, which is really cool. We're all respectfully curious. So we're going to ask some great questions and listen to the answers. And then we're also all collectively responsible. So we're all leaving people, places, projects in a better place than we found them. And then we're all seriously silly. So we can have a laugh along the way, It's kind of fun out here too. So it's not just about being super serious. It's also about being able to joke about life too. And I think they are the values that we see as an undefinable. And I think we can all aspire to have them. And I actually have seen quite a lot of the community members who come in with like 3 or 4 values, and then they almost start to embed the 5th value in themselves, and they feel like they become a better person from it. So I think that that's a beautiful thing too, is that we almost raise people to being a higher level of themselves through the values that we embody. And I think that that's true of who we are, and who an undefinable could be too, is how do we become better versions of ourselves, and how do we also stay authentic to our true selves versus the labels other people give us.
Yeah, I think I like that. I think people are using the word authentic too much these days, and it's just it's getting a bit silly. But I think if you're really, really, I think a lot of people also don't know who they are. That's the thing. That's a key thing. And I think that people, like you said, think they belong in a certain box, but actually they don't really know who they are. And I think that it's okay to kind of go on that journey. Yeah. And I think that, I found that a lot of people say, like I said, they're a founder or this or that, but actually if they just kind of let go of all that, who really are they? And you said you do some exercise to do that. What was the exercise that you said you did when people join?
Yeah, so we have our joining process is quite interesting, and it maybe reflects the private members club and the way they've approached it. But we have like a recommendation model. So current members must recommend someone, and then they get seconded by someone else. So you're going to meet someone else, and they tell you a bit about what the Undefinable Community is, but also get to know you a bit more, ask you a few questions. In those questions, we I don't even know them by heart because other people do seconding, not me, and they iterate these. But there are some in there about when's the time you let go of a previous self, or when's a goal that you used to have that you now no longer aspire to have. And I think that that's really interesting, is how can you become more than your previous self? How can you let go of the identity that restrains you? And it's almost like wearing your masks. Like sometimes it's okay to have an identity and a label and to be in that room. So sometimes me turning up as a triathlete, fine. Me turning up as a runner, fine. Me turning up as someone who is really interested in the future of work, cool. Signing up as a future careers expert, great. Like I can do a lot of different roles, a lot of different masks, but actually I'm more than any of them. And so when we think about, particularly relating back to sport, people who have that gold medal syndrome, they get the success they've always wanted, and then they realize, oh, it's not actually quite what I thought it was going to be. And then they get into that depression that follows because they think, oh, I've achieved everything I ever want to be, and it's not actually as crazy as it sounds. And so you often find that the bronze medalist is the happiest, because the bronze medalist is the one that's happy to be on the podium. The silver medalist wants to be the gold medalist. The gold medalist realizes that it's no longer that important, but the bronze medalist is just happy they went fourth. So that is an interesting mindset to apply to the rest of this, is just remembering that even when you achieve what you want, it might not even be what you want anymore.
Oh my God, that is so true, actually. And that is the same with lots of things in life. People talk about, I've had a few people on the podcast who've sold their company and they're like, oh, that was the worst thing I've ever done. Like, they're just like, I'm so depressed. Like, it's really bad. So, and yeah, I think that's crazy. But one last question, because I feel like you said the future, and like, when you said to me earlier, you're like, oh, I've got a 10-year goal, I'm going to do Ironman, but I'm like, actually, I'm going to do that in 1. So I'm like, I want to know now what is your future? Because you had a 10-year aspirational goal, which you did in 1. Yes. What are your future goals now? What are you hoping to achieve in the next maybe 1 to 10 years?
So for me, really going and building this undefinable brand is at the heart of this. I think there's something there which, like you say, relates to yourself, but I think relates to a lot of people. And the community is one expression of that, is seeing it come together, seeing these people share that intimate space together. That's really what the community is about, is intimate space. So physical spaces, virtual spaces, holding space. But how can we or how can I give that impact beyond just the community? So writing the book is one means of doing that. Undefinable Careers. I've seen a lot of people, how do I navigate this world? How do I think about how I show up? How do I professionalize what I do? How do I scale it? How do I earn a decent amount so I can actually make meaningful impact and not think about money? That's the kind of big question, isn't it? And that is something that I truly believe I can help with as well. So building the brand around that is important, as is sort of thinking about the top end. How do I help those in their 50s and 60s work with those in their 20s and 30s? There's a huge opportunity there. And I'm not quite sure how it's going to articulate itself, but there's something in the expertise of those who have done it and lived it and have been through many different rounds of places, and the newness and freshness and the closeness to technology, and particularly AI now, where they can help one another massively. And together they can be unbeatable. They basically play each other blind spots. So I want to look into that at some point. And I also say that the future of work, I want to help people live a meaningful work, because through that, they can do a lot more with the rest of their life. If they spend 40 hours their week minimum, let's be real, doing work, then how can we make that actually meaningful? Yeah. And meaningful doesn't mean fun. It doesn't mean necessarily enjoyable. It means like actually has a purpose and direction, and it's going somewhere. And I think that that is at the heart of this, is give people direction, clarity, and a feeling like what they're doing is actually meaningful. And then the rest of life will follow.
My God, that's so good. I feel like today has been a really refreshing episode, because it's just like, everyone's talking about labels and everyone's talking about high aspirational goals and stuff like that. And actually, you're like, do you know what? It's just free to be you and actually enjoy the process, enjoy everything, and, the success will come. So thank you so much today.
Nice. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Sabrina.
Hey.